This is the biggest secret in human history. And I don't give a toot whether people call me a conspiracy theorist. On a level of probability, I'm pretty bloody sure it's true. And what they're doing is they're misusing the laws of your country to hinder what is a constitutional right by Congress to oversight every arm of government. Now, if Americans don't care about that, then you can go another 60 years in ignorance. It's up to you.
Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles. This is a recent blockbuster conference presentation by Ross Coulthart, distinguished investigative journalist at the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies conference. Link to the full speech is in the description. Recommend you check it out if you are interested. But Ross Coulthart presented a keynote speech where he detailed his journey from skepticism to active investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. Ross Coulthart's one of the few mainstream journalists to really take this subject seriously, and he's gotten all in on it. His pivotal moment occurred during a night that completely altered his views, driving him to delve deeply into the topic. Coulthart highlighted his extensive background in journalism and its recent investigations into UAPs, including his interview with key figures like David Grush, who alleged the existence of a secret UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program involving non-human technology and biologics. Coulthart emphasized the persistent stigma and ridicule surrounding UAPs, despite overwhelming admissions from the U.S. government acknowledging their reality. He criticized the mainstream media for its inadequate coverage and the systematic disinformation campaigns by the government designed to suppress the truth. He pointed out the significant role played by private aerospace companies and government officials in maintaining this secrecy and the alleged misuse of funds and legal loopholes to keep the information concealed. In the conference, he also discussed the historical context, referencing early military acknowledgments of UAPs and the deliberate efforts to debunk and discredit public interest in the phenomenon. Coulthart's investigations revealed a long-standing, secretive operation involving the retrieval and reverse engineering of non-human craft, suggesting a covert Cold War between nations like the U.S., China, and Russia over this advanced technology. Towards the end of his speech, Coulthart called for greater transparency and accountability from the government, using the public and Congress to demand the truth. He expressed hope that scientific collaboration such as SCU and Seoul Foundation, along with public pressure, could lead to significant breakthroughs in understanding and disclosure of UAPs. But I think he believes our time is running out. We need to move quickly on this and take more risks than we would have in the past. Link to the full speech is in the description, but here's 3 sections I thought were really interesting, and I'll give my reaction.
And I say if these allegations are true, I can well imagine this awful secret is one that some in government have decided it is best to stay concealed. Now, I know what many of you are probably thinking. This is sci-fi nonsense, silly stories peddled by attention-seeking Walter Mitty's to a credulous and gullible journalist. That's what I thought. I was skeptical. I still don't know whether to believe it. I do fear I'm being fed disinformation, but I've heard now the same story from so many sources, I'm beginning to think it might plausibly have some truth to it. Then around this time in my research, a flood of letters started happening. It was first a trickle, then a flood. It took months for people to respond to my 160 plus letters. But after what I suspect was an agonizingly difficult decision for them to decide whether to engage, they did. And I began speaking to some extraordinarily clever, and I say this on their behalf, patriotic people. People who love their country, love and respect their constitution, honour their national security oath, but think you've got a bloody right to know about what they know. And I'm angry on their behalf. I will die in a ditch if need be, I'd rather not, to protect the anonymity of the sources I spoke to and am still engaging with. But one of them I can name, because he authorised me to. He called me on an open line out of the blue, and I could barely believe who he was. Because if I was to think of the one person who I wanted to speak to me, it was him. His name was Matt Kobitz. He was the US Navy's former long-time Director of Science and Technology Development, their chief R&D scientist, their chief geek for many years, for over 30 years.
Okay, so yeah, this is amazing. The Navy chief scientist. It's a very high level position. Ross Coulthart gets a call from him after he initially is skeptical. Then he changes his mind one night when he actually comes across several witnesses, military people who claim to have background information on these programs. And that changes his mind. He ends up believing these people, or at least believing that something's going on. Like he says there, could it have happened? Could it actually be possible? He starts hearing from so many sources, so he writes 160 letters out to people, and he starts receiving these letters back. And so he receives a letter back, a call actually, from a U.S. Navy chief scientist. Let's listen.
He was a beautiful, wisecracking, 92-year-old Brooklyn Jewish scientist with a beautiful sense of humour. And sadly, when I caught up with him, he was dying from cancer. And fate dictated that I caught him at the perfect time. He was sitting in his Baltimore home, bored out of his brain, with too much time on his hands. And here was this Aussie journalist asking him about the work that he'd done as part of the greatest generation with the US Navy's R&D division. He was fiercely proud of what he achieved, and so he should be. And over several months, he finally opened up to me about what he was, on his own admission, read into. He was briefed on the program. And he told me that he had been read into a classified program involving retrieved non-human technology, recovered alien spacecraft. He eventually admitted that he was officially briefed that America had retrieved multiple non-human craft, and that he was aware there was a secret operation underway for decades, in his words, to undertake to reverse engineer them. He admitted that most of what he knew was effectively hearsay, although from some excellent official sources. This is something he'd been briefed into in his official capacity. He did admit that on one occasion he was flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, literally taken deep underground, and taken to a secure room and shown what looked like some kind of bulkhead from a craft which he believed was constructed in a way that defied conventional explanation.
Okay, so that's amazing inventions, right? Just bombshells from Ross Coulthart. This is from the U.S. Navy chief scientist. Said he's briefed into this program, which you've heard about before, going on for many decades. Exactly what David Grush said, that they have craft, multiple craft. And then he's actually flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that's where supposedly the wreckage from the Roswell crash was flown to, was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he goes deep down, underground bunker, and is shown what he believes is a bulkhead of an alien craft. And this guy is a chief scientist for the Navy's R&D program, so he should have some idea on that. And 92 years old, on his deathbed, dying of cancer. I mean, this is just the story that you're hoping to hear, right? That these guys have nothing to lose at this point, and so they're going to actually spill the beans.
The craft's skin and inner bulkhead were composites bonded at an atomic level. He suspected it was non-human intelligence technology. But being the scientist he was, infuriatingly, he wouldn't say to me it was alien tech. He would just say it was something he had never seen that any human could make. Nat was a patriot. He was a decent, honourable public servant. He respected the fact this program was being kept secret for a reason. But as a scientist, he also recognised that the American public, and especially Congress, had the right to know what was being done with taxpayer dollars. And he frankly told me that as far as he knew, there was no good justification for keeping it secret. So he never told me why he'd actually done this. But shortly after he passed from cancer in 2020, I started getting messages and calls. And it turned out he'd basically told people to get in touch with me. I found it very, very difficult to accept a lot of what they told me. I still do. I find it mind-blowing that I'm in this position as a serious insect journalist who spent his career investigating crime and corruption, that I'm on the edge of what is the most fringe subject in the world. But every single one of these people that Nat put me onto was talking about one thing: the program. A highly secret, very, very, very carefully compartmentalized retrieval effort of non-human technology craft, and an identically highly protected reverse engineering program being conducted in secret facilities across the United States. Retrieval teams rigidly compartmented. Operations absolutely need to know. Mind-boggling secrecy. Multiple sources have told me that there was a very clear threat made: if you talk about this, you will be killed.
Wow, amazing. So after this guy passes, Ross starts getting a bunch of messages from people who allege to be on the program. Nat, the guy that passed, told him to actually contact Ross Coulthart. And now Ross is in this difficult position as a serious professional investigative journalist in Australia who has looked into crime, corruption in the past, many stories for decades, essentially. But now he's receiving just unbelievable information from U.S., essentially, whistleblowers, people on the program who have knowledge of the program, saying it's extremely compartmentalized. There is definitely crash retrieval programs going on, as well as a super secret reverse engineering program across facilities all through the U.S. So this is a larger operation. And he said specifically, if you talk about it, any information goes out, then you will be killed if you talk about it. That's just an amazing bombshell from Ross Coulthart. Thanks so much for his investigative efforts. Let's go to the next section I thought was interesting.
Craft that multiple witnesses saw as metallic, elliptical in shape, flat on the bottom with a dome on top. Classic flying saucers, confirmed by a commanding general. I was also struck by how blatantly an active official deception operation on UAPs was admitted in the declassified military and intelligence archives. It's not well understood that the dismissive debunking strategy towards UAP sightings by the US Department of Defense is part of an official policy developed 70 years ago by the CIA's so-called Robertson Panel. This extraordinary decision was made in secret by a group of scientists, military officers and spies that public interest in UFOs, what we call today UAPs, should be debunked and discredited. And a secret report was prepared for the CIA recommending a mass media campaign that would strip UFOs of their so-called aura of mystery. The report said, and I quote, and it's an astonishing quote, "The debunking aim would result in reduction in public interest in flying saucers which today evoke a strong psychological reaction. This education could be accomplished by mass media such as television, motion pictures, and popular articles. Basis of such education would be actual case histories, which had been puzzling at first but later explained. As in the case of conjuring tricks, there is much less stimulation if the secret is known. Such a program should tend to reduce the gullibility of the public and consequently their susceptibility to clever, hostile propaganda. Now, obviously, the official explanation for why the CIA talked explicitly about tricking the American public is this idea that all of this public reporting of UFOs was causing a huge drain on the Air Force's time because they were having to investigate them. And so they were arguing that we should suppress this in the public interest because it was making a national security threat, because then they wouldn't be able to focus on the real UFOs. But to me, that's a completely nonsensical argument, because if you think about it, you want your public to be alert and alarmed. You want them to report any kind of anomalous phenomena. Why would the Air Force be interested in discouraging people in that era from reporting alarming sightings of objects in our skies that could very well have been a foreign adversary aircraft?
Ross makes some great points here. I mean, the Robertson panel, can you imagine Central Intelligence Agency saying that they're going to embark upon a disinformation campaign, basically a mass media campaign to change the public's perception? And if you look at what they recommended, it's exactly what Arrow is doing now. Basically, they recommended is you take cases, known cases, like Project Blue Book, and basically show how they're easily answered. So, and that's what Arrow has done in their Volume 1 report. They left out all of the actual anomalous cases, the real anomalous cases, such as the Nimitz or the gimbal. They didn't even mention. And instead, all they talked about was the answerable cases. So basically say there's nothing to see here. Most of the cases that we have can be explained by simple mundane effects. Exactly what the CIA Robertson panel recommended. Amazing.
Also, should one bother to actually read it, the Robertson panel report admits that one scientist on the panel resolved that an extraterrestrial explanation was the only possible explanation for many of the cases, and he was overruled by the rest of the panel. The Robertson panel was frankly a fix. It was a deliberate deception to suppress public interest into UAPs, and it began the current contemporary attitude of stigma, ridicule, and contempt for coverage of the subject. We've all been hoodwinked. There are other red flags there in the historical declassified archives pointing to the idea that agencies within the US government were and still are trying to obfuscate and manipulate public opinion to play down the UAP mystery.
Yeah, you can see this for sure. If you just look at the reports that come out from Arrow, I already mentioned that their Volume 1 report just focused on easily answerable cases and says that there's nothing to see here. They even mention Michael Herrera, but just say that one guy reported this. They don't say they actually looked into any of it, right? The Michael Herrera case, which I've interviewed Michael, can be checked, right? They can check to see if there were military units in the area, if this event could have possibly even happened, but they don't mention anything about it. They didn't even check anything. It's like they're just doing exactly what the Robertson panel recommended. And as he says, it's still going on.
After General Nathan Twining had recommended a study of UAPs, Project Saucer, later Project Sign, the first of the US Air Force investigations was established in December 1947. And that official report, released a year later, declared that these objects were not extraterrestrial. It didn't provide a jot of evidence to support such a claim, and it suggested, without this evidence, that they were possibly of Soviet origin. But then, of course, there was the intriguing testimony of US Air Force officer Edward Ruppelt, who Micah talked about. He'd seen a secret Project Sign report, and he blew the whistle on it. Estimate of the situation, which had declared secretly that these objects were interplanetary craft. There's a whiff here of a cover-up. Declassified FBI files also show that J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, was briefed in 1950 about reports of 50-foot-wide crashed flying saucers and small humanoid bodies being recovered from the New Mexico desert. And unfortunately for the FBI, this UFO memo was written up by an officer, an agent called Guy Hotel, and it's become the most requested item in the FBI files. The FBI's at pains over the years to say that Hotel's memos allegations were never corroborated. There was never any finding that it was all true. But it soon becomes clear that the many compelling witness reports that provided the basis for these claims, from purported crashes at Roswell, Aztec, New Mexico, and Kingsman, Arizona, they cannot be quickly discounted. Time and time again, witnesses reported being threatened, even told they would be murdered if they talked about this. Why?
So you can see Coulthart seems frustrated here. He's investigated many, many cases over the decades as a professional investigative reporter. And here, I think he sees something that is quite obvious. And if you look back in the history, there has been misinformation the whole way. He said it's quite amazing, and he was struck by how blatantly an active official deception operation on UAPs has been admitted in declassified military intelligence archives so many times, and he keeps hearing the same thing. So I think he feels pretty confident that this is actually going on. And the next section here, final section, talks about his case for America, that we need something to change and change soon.
This is the biggest secret in human history. And I don't give a toot whether people call me a conspiracy theorist. On a level of probability, I'm pretty bloody sure it's true. And what they're doing is they're misusing the laws of your country to hinder what is a constitutional right by Congress to oversight every arm of government. Now, if Americans don't care about that, then you can go another 60 years in ignorance. It's up to you. I mean, frankly, I actually don't think the amendment will pass in its current form. I think it will be emasculated. And frankly, unless you, the American voter, can motivate politicians to actually do something about this, it's a complete waste of time. And just like Roscoe Hillenkotter tried in 1960 and was publicly vilified for doing so, a former DCI of the CIA went public within a year of leaving office, pushing for UAP transparency. What the hell? Why did he do that? He did that because he knew about the program. He thought it was monstrous, outrageous that this secret was being kept. And I do. But I don't vote. But I happen to think that America, the greatest generation, showed in this town 60 years ago things that me as a little boy, I loved it. It inspired me. You as a country can do great things, and you've lost your way. It's as simple as that. This is an issue that goes to the absolute heart of what you've all been told, your country is great. That's a load of steaming bullshit right now. You're failing. And you're failing because there's this monstrous secret that's being perpetuated. Trillions of dollars, I suspect, have been diverted from your budgets. You can't even fix your roads. What the hell? Why don't you vote these pricks out and get people in who are going to make a change?
Okay, well, some pretty strong words there from Ross Coulthart, dropping bombs. I mean, he has many decades of experience. He calls a spade when he sees it, and he's put his professional career essentially on the line. I don't think it's necessarily hurt his career, but it easily could have. And he is just amazed and perplexed. 60 years ago, like he mentioned, You had the DCI come out and push for UAP transparency, and yet the cat was put back into the bag. And so here we are now, modern era. We have David Grush, Colonel Nell, all these other credible whistleblowers speaking out. And he still thinks that the UAP Disclosure Act, so the Senate Intelligence Act and the UAP Transparency Act that Garcia forwarded, he thinks that will be emaciated and it will not have the powers that it needs, which it really needs public hearings. It needs subpoena authority, subpoena power, and probably eminent domain to go into the actual private organizations, the corporations that Ross says in this conference, in this speech, is where the technology is being sequestered. So amazing discussion there. And we'll see this year, does America have what it takes to actually release these secrets, to show the truth to the world? I've argued that there's no advantages to the military-industrial complex for releasing this information. It's all negative. They've done terrible things in the past, and this would be giving away all their advantages and highlighting their extremely dirty laundry. So thanks again to Ross Coulthart. Just amazing stuff over the years, and he continues today. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps, and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video recommended by YouTube just for you. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Lehto, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.